Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Man, these videos are getting somewhat tiresome to make, but we need to plow through. We are closing to the finish line. We have done 2022 champions ranked, 2021 champions ranked, MCOC classes ranked, and majority of the classes. We have now Cosmic today, tomorrow is Mutant, then we have overall top list, and then a tier list update. Right, so here we can see the previous Cosmic Top 10. Hercules, Hyperion, CGR, Corvus, Null, King Groot, Venom, and Venom Pool joined 7th, CMM, Odin, and Angela. And this is a list that overall has changed the least, I would say, especially towards the top. So most of the champions have kind of maintained their positions, but obviously there are some, new things that I have noted about them and different types of reasonings why they are placing where they are. So we still have a lot to discuss. As always, before we go any further, the champions that didn't quite make to the list, but I still have to mention because they are excellent rank-up choices and I do think offer a ton of potential for players. I do think Medusa is one of them. Now out and available as a 6-star, we definitely can see her still being totally viable champion. She's not the most complex champion in the sense that, she has Furies, Armor Breaks, Armor Shatter, completely shuts down robots, and then auto block as a failsafe and some bleed access. So fairly kind of straightforward champion by today's standards, but that robot domination is still super effective. Not to mention that access to armor break is kind of becoming more important, or at the very least there are more champions who interact with armor breaks and nodes as well. So that is allowing her to maintain her relevance in my opinion. Then on top of it, and Icarus, for instance, a champion that does not make the list, but I do think is a fairly solid Cosmic addition. I do think currently of him as a somewhat of a discount Hyperion. And that just again shows that, not all the new champions are always going to be better than the old ones, and you don't need 50,000 abilities, to remain towards the top. I do like, his immunities and his energize and special spamming is very fun, access to a ton of debuffs. Just, I do think they could have made him somewhat more effective, so it's kind of easier to notice him in the pool of great champions. And then further on, we obviously have Vision Arcus, who's also a very capable champion. We have some people still rave about Venom the Duck. I personally never have particularly enjoyed him. But I do like how Terrax is making somewhat of a comeback, because people are noticing him offensively more and more as well, especially due to his immunity to power drain, power steal, power burn, power lock, and end rate effects from #metal champions, which is quite neat. It definitely can come in handy in more than enough situations. And Nihilus, I actually see someone with a rank 4 Nihilus as well. I do think he's a somewhat offensively underrated champion, and now with this new, I think, Sauron synergy, Nihilus, 4-second increased duration on the stifles definitely improves his offensive viability. But let's get to the actual top 10. And obviously, we still have Odin as well, that this time did not make it on the list it was previously. I still think he's an absolute powerhouse as a champion. It's just I do think with a few new additions and him not quite fitting in too many game modes, aside from, pre-fight and occasional offensive use in Alliance War. I have seen him put in some work in Alliance Quest, but in general he doesn't seem to be gained like a mainstream popularity from the community. And obviously Proxima is always one of those champions that can do some amazing things, but nobody ever wants to do them with Proxima for the most part. Alright, let's get to the actual top 10 then now. Spot number 10, and it's still quite early days, and I do think Cersei has the potential to climb even higher, because only recently people have kind of started to notice and acknowledge her. Again, partially thanks to Battlegrounds, because she is a really huge pain in the butt to fight against, unless you have like a long shot or Mojo that's like a very great defender, specifically countering her abilities. If you don't have a great counter, you're kind of screwed. She can be an absolute defensive nightmare with all her glancing. Then on top of that, her special attacks can go unblockable, they can stun you, and the fight can go very wrong very fast. So plenty to keep in mind, as well as some annoying abilities, like she reduces the duration of stuff like heal blocks, incinerate, shocks, and bleeds, which can, prevent some offensive damage inputs in those limited windows when you are able to bypass glancing. And all that being said, obviously, of her as a defender, she's actually a very potent attacker. And I do think that her role as a defensive champion kind of overshadowed how capable she is offensively for a lot of players. For anybody who has seen my incursions runs for like last month, I virtually always want to bring in Cersei for my incursions runs. And I also do like to use her now and then, in other types of content. Because with all of those Furies, and the initial mistake with Cersei was that we always kind of focused on getting the max 15 Furies and stuff like that with that level 2, but it's completely unnecessary. You don't need it. You get your 10 Furies and you're still going to be doing a ton of damage. And then from that point, you can either go for a regeneration that's extremely potent, or you can just refresh your Furies and play safe. So she does have a very potent regeneration, even unawakened with her level 2 from the distance. It has to typically be the second special attack in the fight, so it doesn't really work in short fights, but in longer fights, her regen is very, very potent. And then she also does have an absolute nuke of a level 3 for longer type of fights. So she's definitely very capable offensively. One of my kind of like cheeky things that I personally like to do in Battlegrounds was draft Cersei early, where opponents draft a Mystic attacker to specifically counter her, and then use Cersei offensively to nuke down opponent's defender, because people always underestimate how hard she can hit and dispatch her enemies. So, at the moment, I'm putting in Cersei at 10th, but I do kind of expect her to climb higher and gain even more value over time. And in spot number 9th, and this is an experimental placement, so to speak. I am almost all but sure that this placement is going to change. Hulkling is either going to shine, which I do think is most likely, or he's going to come crashing down. I know he's a brand new champion. We have seen very little of him. He has only been in game for a few weeks now. But at the same time, with all the footage that we already have seen from Hulkling, it is quite clear that he has a purpose. He will have uses. People have gone through plenty of scenarios of different type of nodes and matchups where he does work, because he does have several immunities, immune to poisons and shocks. Additionally, he's also immune to any power manipulation, which is quite huge these days. And on top of that, obviously, he has access to unblockable, easy fury buffs, tons of buffs in general. He has AI manipulation on his heavy attacks, which is always quite useful. It's kind of like a reverse of Hercules' Infuriate. And obviously his damage output seems quite potent as well. So I do 100% expect Hulkling to land in the top 10. In fact, I'd be all but willing to bet that next time I do a cosmic ranking, he would be even higher. At the moment, I am reluctant to push him higher, just because it is so brand new and he has a lot of kind of like stuff to prove to us. But 100% from the initial impressions, he seems like a very capable champion that will be used in multiples of game modes. That regeneration when he gets hit also can be super clutch to let you recover from your own mistakes and then go indestructible. Obviously, huge damage through block, access to unblockable, those big furies, and no real ramp up. It doesn't even have a real rotation, so to speak. You don't have to throw that level 1 if you don't want to. You can just go for level 2 straight up, which is always a huge advantage. I typically dislike the champions that require you to do, oh, now you need to throw a level 1, now you need to throw a level 3, now you need to throw another level 1, and then your level 2 is where the huge damage comes, or something like that. Those champions rarely work out. And if a champion doesn't have like a clear, dictated specific rotation, it's typically for the best. And Hulkling is one of those champions that feels fairly free to use under whatever circumstances you want. Obviously, for the bigger numbers, you want the level 2, but you don't necessarily have to have it to access all of his utility. That level 2 is quite literally just, increasing damage, but it's not like his damage is weak to begin with. And then also absolutely love his interaction with buffs. I think it is one of the coolest and most potent interactions with buffs, where it does give you a massive attack increase for each unique buff that you have active on yourself. And with that, you can virtually already double or more your base attack. That's quite huge. Right. So for now, all intents and purposes, Hulkling, I'm going to place him in 9th. I can't wait to get this champion myself alongside Scorpion. I would, and it's kind of funny because in the stream I talked about 3 different rankings of champions in my head, where there are champions that I would rank immediately as I acquired them. And then there are champions that I'd be happy to acquire and I would rank if I need them for something specific, like if I have to rank them for defense or for battlegrounds or for some different type of quests, so on and so forth. Those are all very good champions, but they're not quite like immediately must-haves. And then there are champions that, you know, it's very hard for me to imagine myself ranking up under any circumstances. Those typically are the bottom of the barrel champions. But the point is, Hulkling does kind of belong in that first category. I'm all but certain that as soon as I would get a 6-star Hulkling, I would rank him up, unduped, and I'd start trying to squeeze him in my like daily activities and daily gameplay. So, it's a very solid explanation as to why I do believe Hulkling does already kind of deserve, why am I quite confident in putting him on this list already. Now, spot number 7, again, is one of those champions that got mega hype as she got buffed. Then her hype kind of has died down, but at the same time, there is a quite huge following for her. And I do think that spot number 8 is quite appropriate for Angela. Obviously, she does have the downside of requiring you to have her at super high sig to be very effective. Ideally, I believe you want her at like sig 160, if I'm not mistaken. Sig 163, 166, no, sig 1. Here we go, sig 180 actually. Whoa. And sig 180 is where you want to have your Angela at in order to be able to completely reduce the duration of all the damaging debuffs with 3 buffs active, which is, you know, by far the easiest thing to acquire. And obviously with that also she would be fully nullify immune, which for a Cosmic Champion is absolutely a huge thing, especially because Cosmic Champions typically get targeted by Kabam with the buff nullification, which is the way they try to prevent or make it extremely hard for Cosmic Champions to be viable in matchups that, you know, that typically would want to be your go-to options. There aren't many or any other champions in Cosmic class that are nullify immune, aside from Angela, so that already gives her kind of like a very big niche. On top of that comes auto block ability accuracy reduction with the sig, which also can be useful. She can also parry projectiles. They actually changed that ability. Not that it matters too much, but it did make her significantly worse in one matchup in particular at the moment, which I believe is Ebony Maw, because initially it said that she can parry advanced training allows non-contact attacks, and at some point it was changed to against non-mystic champions, but it might be that they reverted it back to how it originally was. Either way, parrying non-contact attacks, obviously completely awesome. The regen is great. Damage output is fairly solid. She is a hard-hitting champion, maybe not, you know, in a super long kind of turn fights, but in short to medium fights, she definitely has a ton of damage. I do like her party piece on some cheese nodes whenever she gets to spam her level 3, and that increases her special 3 damage, you know, based on each buff, so she can drop some massive level 3s. On top of that, she does have some worthwhile, useful synergy partners, like be that with Mr. Fantastic or be that with Aegon, and obviously Odin's synergy does make her significantly more powerful in longer fights, and she's just like a very solid, straightforward, simple champion. She doesn't have mega long list of abilities, she doesn't do a million things, but what she does matters. What she does is fairly useful, and again, in case of that nullification immunity, I think she's pretty much the only Cosmic Champion that's immune to nullify, if I can remember. Let's quickly try and glance through it. Yeah, I'm quite sure that there's nobody else. Yep, Angela is the only Cosmic that is nullify immune at 3 buffs or more, which obviously, again, is a fairly big deal, where that's becoming more and more important. And now, again, the age-old fight. The age-old debate. Venom or Venompool? And my initial kind of assessment, my initial opinion, is still the one that I stand by. I do think that Venom is better for more fights in standard length content than Venompool is. Now, I think in shorter fights, by definition, Venom has advantage, because he does have significantly quicker ramp up. I am aware that Venompool can increase the speed of his ramp up by eating up buffs, but that already puts like a fairly big kind of limit on which fights he can ramp up quickly. in longer fights, without a doubt, Venom Pool is going to be better in vast majority of the scenarios. However, you know, for your standard AQ, for, let's say, for map 8, even for map 8, I personally prefer Venom. I know some people like Venom Pool, but I do like to use Venom more, but it also has to do with the fact that I do Destruct lane in section 1, and because Venom can inflict more bleeds, it's kind of more useful there. But on a personal level, again, for AQ, I prefer Venom, but I know that Venom Pool has been putting in plenty of work in Alliance Quest map 8 as well. For virtually any other map below map 8, I think Venom would typically probably be better. They both have the regen on level 1, however, Venom's regen, again, works with any buff type. Venom Pool's regen only works with armor ups. So, regen department overall has to go to Venom, in my opinion, even though Venom Pool's regen is kind of better when it does work, but it just doesn't work anywhere near as often. And I do think that overall, Venom Pool does have somewhat more utility, but Venom has plenty of it, and there is big enough difference for you to have worth ranking up both of those champions. But still, at this point in the game, for me personally, I do use and rely on my Venom more in more types of content. Will not be the same for everybody. That is why I'm kind of tying them up, because they are both very similar champions. They both cover a lot of similar fights. Not all of them. There will be fights that Venom can do, that Venom Pool can't do. Like a good example is Venom doing the Distract lane, because he can stack his bleeds up. Venom Pool can't do that. Obviously, plenty of fights that both of them cover as well because of the amount of buffs they get, so on and so forth. But I don't think that either or is significantly better than the other. I think in majority of the case, it does fall either on the preference or the individual specific fights. Both of them obviously prevent the Spidey evades, even though Venom's is more effective at that, because, you know, it just automatically always starts at the beginning of the fight. Against tech champions, power burn and drain immunity, which is super useful. Venom Pool does have some cooler synergies. No, then again, Venom has been getting some crazy good synergies, especially with Mr. Negative and also Scorpion now, where every time you throw a heavy attack, basically you gain a power gain buff, or over time you gain power gain buffs as well. And that power gain is very potent. It's very fun, especially when you combine it with Mr. Negative synergy. Just spam that same thing to get your regeneration. You can do some derpy stuff there. But yes, both of them are very competitive to each other. Hence, I'm not distinguishing their placement. No matter which way I would lean, there will be people who are quite unhappy with that. And even beyond that, they are similar enough for me to kind of group them together, in my opinion, because often they do virtually the same thing. I've seen both of them having some uses in Alliance War. Some people bring in Venom Pool, some people bring in Venom. Both of them having some uses in Alliance Quest. I do think that for Battlegrounds, Venom is better. Definitely I've seen Venom being used because of his armor break on his heavy attack, so that lets him take a few matchups. Obviously, the fact that he get armor up he can get an armor up buff enables him to take Havoc as well. Then his generic buff control, so on and so forth. So he has been seen to put in some work in Battlegrounds for sure as well. And for questing, again, in virtually all or most of the shorter quests, Venom is going to be better. In like Everest type of content, I think Venom Pool is going to do better. And synergies, I do think overall Venom probably has the larger baggage and larger benefit with synergies than Venom Pool does. But here we are. So these two guys are in spot 7. They have to share because they are buddies. Symbiote buddies. Right, moving on, spot number 6. A champion that Kabam randomly just ruined with the last update. I really hate that bug. And on a personal level, I really hate that bug with King Groot right now, just because King Groot was a champion that I always used in Alliance Quest, no matter what mastery setup I run, no matter anything else, because he could do every single fight on all 3 sections in map 8 for me. Often use him in section 1 if I screwed up with some other champion. He's not the quickest, but he can get 3 debuffs on the opponents and, you know, finish them off for this track path. And then obviously doing buffed up lanes with him is also quite easy. Not the quickest, but definitely one of the safest options with that Megalodon regeneration. An amazing tank. And he's a perfect example where, again, minor changes can make a massive difference in the champion. He was already having some sort of cult following before the buff, but after the buff, I have seen tons of champions lean tons of players lean quite heavily on King Groot. I have seen people take him to rank 4 even. But I absolutely love that he's immune, obviously, to bleed, power drain, and power burn effects. And there are some of the nodes in map 8 as well, which swaps the power bar. I forgot what was it called, but if you have more power than your opponent when the timer expires, basically swap the power bars. King Groot can make that node pretty cheesy, because if it would trigger, they can't touch your power, but the opponent still loses all of their power, so that's kind of neat. That's kind of a reverse Plague Mind then. Anyways, and obviously, you know, he has his damage phase, he has his build-up phase with his Furies going on and off. Whilst the Furies are off, he has some massive regeneration. He still has up to 10 armor breaks that can be permanent, and the level 2 poisons are very potent, especially when you are able to pause them and then make them stack and stack some more, and have like 3 of poisons running at the same time in longer fights is just awesome feeling. And level 3 is kind of mega heal. A lot of people have been, you know, discussing King Groot, whether he's good rank up unduped, and he does have, you know, his capabilities unduped without a doubt. But one of the biggest upsides of King Groot is that healing, especially considering that he's not the quickest fight finisher. Therefore, King Groot, when awakened, has that feeling of you can be fairly relaxed playing, you can make a mistake in a longer fight, which King Groot is, you know, typically going to be in, because he isn't a sprinter, he isn't a Corvus. And you can always kind of cover for all your mistakes. In my mind, in my opinion, personally, King Groot loses half of his reason for existing if he is unawakened, pretty much. Because then why would you use King Groot if you can just bring in somebody who can do similar things, but finish up the fights way quicker? That regeneration really is what ties his kit together. And it's so powerful. It really makes you feel like you're borderline immortal, or whenever you take hits in Alliance Quest, you know, you don't bother, it's gonna cost me some potions. No, it won't. And the best thing of all is, obviously, if you do get KO'd, you can just revive, and you can heal back to full within a single fight, which is a crazy amount of regen. And then when you do synergize him up, that just gives a whole new level of badassery, because he does get way more Furies and way more damage. Overall, absolutely powerhouse of a champion. A lot of people were having a go at me for ranking him as high as I did last time, which is exact same ranking, spot number 6. But I do think a lot more people have started to realize how great of a champion he is. So in this case especially, I do feel vindicated. I do feel like he has proved himself over the contest. He was one of my MVPs in Act 7, for instance. He's 100% MVP for Map 8 for me. And then obviously, he's an incredible Battlegrounds defender and an underrated Battlegrounds attacker. There are very few feelings sweeter than taking a Killmonger down with King Groot in like 50 seconds and 100% remaining health or something like that. Because you throw that level 1, 3 permanent armor breaks, Killmonger's abilities go offline, and then you just nuke them down. And then obviously his secret weapon, his secret trick in the Battlegrounds specifically, but obviously very useful in the rest of the content as well, is that against robot champions, that level 2 is just an absolute nuke. Each hit King's Breath deals X amount of damage. Damage is tripled against robot champions, so it is such a huge amount of burst damage on the level 2. So he can nuke down any robot that he's facing as well. So he's amazing champion. He works in majority of the important game modes. He offers virtually unrivaled sustainability and safety, and also versatility via his immunity, via his ability to shrug off any type of debuffs, you know, immunity to bleed on top of it, and power control and power drain. Just amazing. Great champion. Right, moving on. And the top rankings virtually haven't changed from the last one, so I'm still putting Null in spot number 5. Null has become much more available since the previous time around. When I ranked Null in top 5 previously, I wasn't 100% certain of that ranking. I kind of went on a general review and impression basis. Right now, though, I have spent much more time with Null. I have also realized he isn't necessarily a champion that I absolutely love using. I do have a rank 3 that is awakened, that is not high sig, and I do use him, which, if anything, serves as proof that he is quite good. If I am running Liquid Courage Double Edge, sometimes even when I'm not, I do use him a ton in Alliance Quest. Because of his ability just to smack out debuffs, reduce opponent's combat power rate, does enable me to be more aggressive on path 7 and section 1 when I have to be. And obviously when I do mess up, there is plenty of decent regeneration as well, especially if you're running Liquid Courage Double Edge. So, what is so good or cool about Null? Well, we can start with number 1. In long fights, he can build up to incredible damage numbers. But that is also the thing that I like least about him. When I used Null in Abyss, I really wasn't enjoying myself. It really felt like you spend about 80% of the fight or 70% of the fight building up to this kind of moment to burst out, and then if you screw up along the way and get KO'd or something goes wrong, it all kind of feels ruined. And it just really felt like one of those frustrating feelings when you use a champion, and I wasn't a big fan of it. Because you did want to build up that those living Abyss to like a huge number before you start doing a ton of damage. But in any realistic, reasonable content, you don't really have to do that. You basically just get to, you know, till you're nearly at 2 bars of power, then drop your level 1 and then get to level 2 and, you know, fight's over. So that isn't the deal breaker situation here. What is to love about him? Super easy access to a ton of debuffs. Thus, automatically the regeneration abilities are immediately virtually shut down. On top of that, obviously, access to a ton of armor breaks, significant increase in damage, with the reduction of opponent's combat power rate that maxes out at 65%, which means that you can hit them a hell of a lot more before you need to bait out the special attack. Thus, you can be more aggressive. Thus, you can finish out the fights quicker. Obviously, access to degeneration, those passive bursts of bleed damage and regeneration also is quite useful. And then his medium and heavy attacks cannot be auto-blocked and evaded. Obviously can come in handy as well, because typically when the fights begin, those are the types of attacks that you want to use anyways. You know, medium mediums, medium light mediums, or parry medium heavies or something like that, in order to build him up. I don't think he's the most complex character. The last thing that I forgot to mention, obviously, is the resistance to degeneration, bleed, and poison obviously make him incredibly Liquid Courage Double Edge friendly, which is also quite awesome. And that's pretty much it. He's, again, not the most complex character. He's not the character that does 50 million things, but he is a character that does plenty, in my opinion. Also, being a Cosmic Champion that absolutely does not rely on any buffs, does him, you automatically kind of give him a bit of a niche area as well. He's like virtually one of the only Cosmic Champions that you can kind of reliably use, for instance, on Power Snuck Node, stuff like that. Battlegrounds proved how potent of a defender he can be as well, at least for now, until people learn how to fight him properly. But, you know, that might take a while as well, because it is a bit random with how AI behaves and when they throw their level 1s and not. But the biggest thing that I realized about Null is, if you like Null, and if you want to play Null as your daily champion, you 100% want to get him to 200. There is a huge difference in your build-up time and your initial damage in shorter fights, whether you're using unawakened or low signal to a high signal. Now, I did take my Null to Sig 26, I believe, in order to get like 2 Living Abyss debuffs active. But you really want them like 13 or 15 debuffs, because then as you get to your level 1, you're probably going to have like 30, 35 of them built up, and then you can do significantly more damage. So you absolutely do not have to have Null awakened in order to do all the same fights. But awakened ability in high sig level does mean more to him than most people realize, because it drastically improves his damage in shorter fights. It really does. But here we are. The last party piece that he does have is that while corruption is active and the opponent has below 50% health or less, he can eat up the regeneration effects and replace them with degenerations. That's just kind of like a mean trolly thing, but it is quite fun to do when you do make it happen. Okay, anyhow, that is about it about Null. I do think he somehow fell in an appropriate place. I do think he's a very potent champion. I do think he has value. I do think he's a scary Alliance War defender. I do think he has value in battlegrounds, offensively, defensively. I know for a fact he's a good Alliance Quest champion. He is good in Abyss of Legends, for instance, that for any kind of like longer forms of content. At the same time, I don't think he's a great daily questing champion unless you have him at Sim 200, which he can be at that point. So a very solid overall champion, and yeah, that's why he is retaining his spot number 5. Moving on, spot number 4. Whoops. Spot number 4 is going to go to an old leader of the class, a champion that still has plenty of relevance, but unfortunately a ton of people have turned their back against him, and that is Corvus. One huge thing that we must acknowledge about Corvus is that he's an absolute monster in Alliance Wars still. He just is. Alliance War is a game mode where you typically boost up anyways, when class boosts are fairly common and normally accepted, and as soon as you fulfill those first 2 conditions, he can just go and wreak havoc. Absolute beast. We have to acknowledge that, without a doubt, in Alliance War. Alliance Quest, Hercules has, in many fights, in many lanes, replaced him. It did for me too. Especially with Hercules as well, because I could use him with and without Liquid Courage double edge masteries. Obviously, you prefer to play AQ Hercules having recoil, but Corvus is the champion that you virtually can't play without having recoil. So Hercules, for me personally, has kind of overtaken, replaced Corvus in map 8. However, there are still plenty of people who run him in map 8, map 7, map whatever. He's still an AQ top tier champion without a doubt. And then one of the most pleasant things that I realized about Corvus is that he's either managing to retain his position or even kind of reclaiming some of his spots for questing purposes if you run Liquid Courage double edge. And the reason for that is because Kabam has carried on spamming their attack modifier lanes. In any larger piece of story content, they do these thematic lanes where if you do the rules, whatever, if you bring in the champions that they're asking you to bring in, so on and so forth, you do gain attack increases. Whether that is, in form of passive fury whenever you intercept, and then there are the ebb and flow nodes where you gain a fury whenever you knock down the opponent, or there is some sort of other paradox node that increases your attack or special attack damage or something. And virtually on almost every, I'd say, in vast majority of the lanes, there are these options of gaining extra attack, thus gaining extra damage. And for Corvus, that is anything. Because if Corvus can finish the fight with 20 charges, he is and forever will be one of the better options for that fight. But thanks to those lanes, he has vastly increased the health pool that he can cover within those 20 charges. Therefore, specifically in Act 8.1 beta, and specifically in 7.4 and 7.3, I myself noticed that I much more often started bringing in Corvus where I had kind of left him behind somewhat before. So he's not out. He's not useless. He's not, unneeded or unwanted or outdated. He's still extremely powerful. He's still extremely potent. The difference right now is that you need to know where you should use him. He's like again, somewhat of a specialty tool, or let's say, fairly fragile tool that still works amazing, potentially the best. It just doesn't do everything. It's kind of like you can't take a scalpel and start chopping down a tree. But it doesn't mean that scalpel isn't a bad instrument, or it isn't possibly the best instrument for a different situation. And that is how I look at Corvus right now. Before, with lower health pools earlier on in the game, with different champion scaling, because 6 stars have been very slowed down by Kabam, they don't get a ton of attack and health increase by higher ranks. Corvus was a bulldozer. Corvus was a don't read notes, don't care, don't have time, just nuke everything, run through. That used to be Corvus of 2 or 3 years ago. Right now, Corvus is, I know exactly what this node is, I know exactly what I'm meant to do, and I'm going to bring in Corvus just because he works there and he nukes that fight down. That's what Corvus is right now. Right. So he still gets his 4th position. Spot number 3 is a slight decrease. Interesting. Because obviously we have 3 champions remaining. Everybody knows these 3 champions. Everybody has a favorite of these 3 champions. And the 3rd spot is a slight decrease. And the 3rd spot at the moment I'm putting in Hyperion. Hyperion has become, again, more available as a 6-star. An incredible powerhouse of a champion. Reminded us all of that in Battlegrounds. Every competitive Battlegrounds player wanted to have Hyperion, wanted to have Hyperion ranked, was jealous if they didn't have one. Because he's crazy good defender, he's crazy good attacker, and most of the meta is due to his versatility. Access to a ton of special attacks, access to level 1 spam, incinerates, access to a ton of furies, huge amount of damage, and then, you know, obviously still the poison immunity, anything else. And then, if you have time, maybe trigger that healing towards the end, top of your health, and get some more points whilst opponents are incinerating out of their life. Crazy good champion. I do think a lot of people kind of forgot about him slightly because he wasn't available as a 6-star up until relatively recently. And then he kind of fell behind many people's minds. So happy that they did release him as a 6-star because he's putting incredible work. Fighting Hyperion without like a very specific counter is always scary, and then obviously offensively dude's just beast. Does fight extremely well in Lion's Quest. It is one of the best questing champions as well, with his burst of level 2 and level 1 spams, sometimes stun looping and whatnot. Works incredibly well with majority of the cosmic nodes and any type of cosmic boost. And then on top of it all, obviously was a force to be reckoned with in Battlegrounds. In Alliance Quest, in Alliance War, I haven't seen him all that much recently, which is, you know, part of the reason, alongside a few other things, why he's the 3rd this time around. I do recognize that he has great amount of utility, great amount of versatility across the entire contest. And as I mentioned before, the coolest thing about Hyperion always has been the fact that he might not be the best counter for a specific fight, but he often is the 2nd or the 3rd best counter. And the wide area of the fights that he can cover by doing slight adjustments to his playstyle is quite incredible. For instance, if you can't, I don't know, bypass some nodes or damage reflect nodes, but you can only throw level 1s, and level 1s only have 1 hit that makes contact, and then the rest of them don't. So you can easily use Hyperion to nuke down Electro, for instance. Or you can use only special 3s if you choose to. You know, you don't need to hit the opponent. The power gain is potent enough for you to comfortably dance around the arena till you can get level 3 and throw them off. Then obviously, you have your cosmic charges that give you, 1 second. Where are the cosmic charges explained? Cosmic overcharge buff. Charges gain period maximum recharge. Each charge pass will increase physical resistance, so he can have a massive physical resistance increase. Also increased attack by those cosmic charges. Obviously, attack increase typically is done by furies though. And yeah, and then the access to that regeneration is much more powerful than people think. Again, Hyperion is just a very old champion that has aged beautifully, and the entire power behind him lies in the fact that he gains a ton of power by doing nothing. And it's up to you what you want to do with it. Which special attacks you want to spam. If you want to use special attacks, obviously, because he has access to plenty of damage without doing that, by accumulating cosmic charge, by accumulating fury buffs. The one downside about Hyperion, I would say, that is virtually everything in his kit does depend on RNG, and you can have 2 very, very different fights and very, very different experiences based on RNG. Because I have seen heavy attacks that give you 4 or 5 furies fairly frequently, and I have dropped so many heavy attacks that didn't give you a single fury. I have got level 1s that places 3, 4 incinerates on the opponent, and I have thrown 3 level 1s in order to place 1 incinerate total on the opponent. I have stunned with my level 2 in like 3 special attacks in a row, and I have dropped 3 special attacks without landing a single stun. So that is the one kind of realistic downside that not a lot of people often mention about Hyperion, but he is quite RNG reliant, without a doubt. The only thing that isn't really RNG dependent is his power gain, and by extension, his cosmic charge and regeneration. But virtually all of the other abilities, oh look at that, 100% an armor break too. And all of the other abilities do unfortunately depend on RNG, which can be quite troublesome at times. Still, all put together, he's a champion that just works and puts in work in almost all of the game modes, and is extremely versatile. And how good Hyperion is often will largely depend on you and how well you can use Hyperion. Even though he's a simple champion, the manner you apply his abilities can be very drastically. Right, now we are left with top 2. And in second spot, and I think this one pretty much everybody expects. Second one, without a doubt, CGI. Now, I was fairly resistant to CGI initially because he does have a lot of weaknesses. He does have a lot of conditions that have to happen right for his ability kit to work. And nobody can convince me otherwise. You need to be able to throw full combos. You need to be able to have like a full loop. Otherwise, he just turns into Groot in a mid-fight if something, you know, messes with his ability accuracy. Like, you need to be able to gain power freely and throw your special attacks freely in whatever order you want. Those are all very important abilities, on top of the fact that as a Cosmic Champion, you need to be able to gain buffs freely. You can't have them actively nullified or hindered with. And significant part of his damage does lie with your ability to stick the armor breaks to the opponent. All of those weaknesses put aside, and this is one of those situations, again, where you really need to see how it translates to the actual game. Can he and is he used in AQ, even the highest level? Yes. Can he and is he used in Alliance War? Absolutely yes. Even I had to reluctantly kind of become significantly better CGR player because my, you know, officers just made me use him for several different parts in Alliance Quest and Alliance War. And in virtually every single one of the last like 5-6 seasons, I have had multiples of wars where I do use CGR. Is he good for story questing? Fuck yeah. He's one of the fastest, you know, medium fight clearers in the game. You know, he's not faster than Corvus in short fights, like the fights that you can finish like 3 or 4 kits. You do need to get to the level 2 to dish out the damage. But for like medium length fights, absolutely squeezes through the fights pretty much as fast as anybody ever does. And then, was he good for battlegrounds? Abso-fucking-lutely. If you had a matchup where you can use CGR, that round was pretty much automatic win. There were hardly any champion that could do the fights faster. So yes, he does function well enough in every single game mode. Even though obviously there are still plenty of nodes that would prevent from using him, there are still plenty of matchups that you should stay away from. But again, as I have explained many times in the past, it doesn't necessarily matter until so long as you have places where the champion shines and is one of the, if or the best option, that champion has a ton of value. That's why I like, you know, the fact that Jubilee has 50 abilities and she could technically squeeze by and be good enough to clear some fights. She still sucks in the eyes of community, and she's not ranked up highly, and nobody really respects that champion just because there isn't anything special about her, just because there isn't anything that she does so much better than most other champions that she would be a viable candidate for you to take her as your go-to option. CGR does many things well enough for you to think, I'm going to bring CGR for this fight. And that is the thing that matters. And yeah, he definitely has proved it overall. And you know, that's always been kind of one of my key reasonings and key conditions when I rank champions. How many game modes, how often these champions are the leading options. or, you know, at the very least in the conversation for the best solutions. And CGR is often there. It's not going to be an answer for everything, but it sure as hell puts in more than his fair share of work. Other aspects, obviously, it's nice to have the immunities that he has, immune to bleed and immune to incinerate. Obviously, if you do have him awakened, access to buff control is still a fairly rare trait in Cosmic class, and is definitely absolutely awesome to have. With that access to buff control is that there is a slight power gain mitigation type of ability. I wouldn't really want to call it a power control because it doesn't typically really last long enough for you to take like any huge advantage, but it is enough for you to kind of be able to dish out more damage before, you know, before worrying about opponents' 3 bars of power, for instance. And then on top of it all, obviously, plenty of debuffs also can shut them down from healing, even though typically he just out-damages the opponents. I do love the fact that he has that automatic armor break in few matches, for instance, against Killmonger, that's completely disabling all of the Killmonger's abilities. And on top of it all, I know that he has many different rotations. I do really feel that he's kind of more simple champion. I do think that people quite a bit overthink the use of CGR to squeeze out, you know, the biggest number or the max amount of aptitudes, when in reality the difference is very little, because you can choose either to do a steady stream of damage with more simple rotation, or do very little damage for a longer amount of time and then kind of have few moments of some gloriously big yellow numbers. I never have been particularly interested in too many specific rotations. There are quite virtually like, you know, two rotations, I would say, that you kind of need to know. The one that lets you drop your level 2 before opponents can use their level 1, which is parry heavy, parry medium, finishes light, trigger the power gain, then medium finish with a medium to trigger the vigilance and drop a level 2, in which one you cannot dex beforehand if you want to get out the max damage output, or the rotation where you basically leave the power gain as your 4th or 5th buff to trigger, just so you can go from level 3 to level 3 and double stack the Furies. That's pretty much all that's needed as far as I'm concerned to know about CGR. And I know that I'm gonna get screams about this, but really, you guys can just chill the fuck out. I still think he's an insanely amazing champion, so leave me be. Obviously, few downsides. I don't need to go over the downsides. I did already at the beginning. All of those are important shortcomings. He's not a perfect champion. There are plenty of weaknesses to CGR, but obviously the upsides do make it worth dealing with them whenever you can. So here we are, CGR, spot number 2. And now the best champion in the Cosmic class, without a doubt. Ta-da! The Son of Zeus. It's just stupid. That's what it is. It's a stupid champion for stupid people who are lazy and don't care about shit. In other words, perfect AQ champion for me, because I don't give a shit about AQ, I just want to get it done. And the fact that you can extend his immortality for, you know, I don't know, 20 plus seconds if you're aggressive enough, which you typically can be thanks to Infuriate buff, you know, sweet. Is the one champion that doesn't make me feel bad for getting hit in the face. The one champion that I use to waddle through Alliance Quest by having him at 1% health, often in Section 1, just because I don't care. The one champion that let me be stupidly lazy. He is the champion right now that can let you clear half of the contest without reading abilities, because none of the abilities really matter if you're just immortal anyways. And obviously, few things about Hercules. He is much better with Liquid Courage Double Edge than without. However, I do use him a lot without Liquid Courage Double Edge as well, just because of Alliance, where I do have to take those masteries off, and I still bring him in Alliance Quest, and he's my you know, daily Alliance Quest champion, unless I need him for Alliance War. And he works just fine. You're just gonna have, instead of level 1 and then opponent being dead by the time you get to level 2, if you're not running Liquid Courage Double Edge, you typically need to drop a level 1 and then a level 2. That's about as big of a difference you have. Fortunately, you do not get the healing then, which obviously is a huge bonus. The fact that he takes less damage from bleed and also less damage from poison, and lets poison reduce his healing by a smaller amount, makes it so that whenever you are running Liquid Courage Double Edge, he heals passively. Not much, but it's still something, and it counts, especially when you're running, you know, on a few % health. It's good enough for you to get in parries without triggering immortality too early. That's what it's good enough for. Right, then obviously he's a ramp up champion. That's super easy to ramp up, and you can get a max ramp up in a single fight. That ramp up really does remind me of Mojo, and I love those ramp up champions the most, where you do have a ramp up goal that, and you can get the max ramp up in even the first fight of the quest, but then obviously you do carry on some portion of it, and the more fights you do, the less you have to worry about it further on, and the more damage you have from the start. So the ramp up is kind of virtually identical to Mojo's. You do your 3 actions, which are relatively easy to do, to be honest, and you know, it's not really ever a problem to have him ramped up. The clutch stun immunity is quite awesome, especially now that we are getting parried left, right, and center all across the board. Saved my ass a few times in few different areas. And another thing that I absolutely love about Hercules is the fact that he can dish out a ton of damage without needing to use any of his special attacks, without having to do full combos and things like that. Then the fact that he has that True Sense buff that bypasses effects of miss and auto block, obviously super helpful too. And access to the buffs should you happen to need them. For instance, like an Alliance quest buff top lanes, it's there. The buffs last long enough for you to easily be able to maintain them. Fairly easy champion to use. And again, we can take a list of anything. Arguably one of the best questing champions for any kind of like medium length fights. Then on top of that, Battlegrounds, amazing offensive champion. Even though you do have to ramp him up from the beginning, he still put in a ton of work, was able to close out fights very, very quickly. Which also need I remind people is typically where almost everybody used him without Liquid Courage Double Edge. So that's yet again is quite a bit of proof that he is capable. And then we have Alliance Quest, I think the best Alliance Quest champion at the moment. Alliance War, is he used? Yes, he is used in Alliance War still. And virtually in every other area of the game. That's how dominant he is. I do think that obviously having his Awakened ability is a huge deal. I do think that he is good enough to be ranked 3 unawakened though. The higher sig the better, obviously. And that immortality is just stupid. It really is stupid. It feels like you're playing the game on like baby wheels. Because you don't need to worry about getting hit with a special attack. You can just be super aggressive, try and finish the fight quickly. You can try and intercept your opponents when they have like 2 bars of power. They shoot level 2 to the face. Oh well, didn't matter. And you can keep on smacking them down. The fact that he's unblockable whilst immortal is just added extra bonus, which again lets you be significantly more aggressive still. And the fact that you can cover huge amount of health pool whilst under immortality obviously is absolutely insane. On top of it all, even if the immortality ends, it's not like you're dead immediately. You can just go back and play somewhat cautiously and finish the fight out. And if you're running Liquid Courage Double Edge, if that fight lasts a while, you actually get to heal up throughout the fight. So it's just a stupid, stupid, stupid champion. That's fucking amazing though. I do think he's borderline game-breakingly good though. I do think he's game-breakingly good. I do think he's pretty much one of those champions that, wow, like, the way I looked at the game, like, there's Quake, there's Ghost, and then there's everybody else. At the moment, we do have, like, Hercules and Kitty that are virtually there as well. That not many more champions like this the game can take. And I hope we don't get too many of them. Like, 1 a year is max, maybe. But even that, I think, is a lot. Because, yeah, they do feel like playing the game on easy mode. I'm just gonna take in my Herc. Fuck reading, fuck learning nodes, fuck learning how to evade special attacks, just fucking go pew pew pew. That's what these champions do. That's exactly the effect Quake was. When nodes, what are nodes? Only thing I care about, can I Quake it? Yes, don't give a shit about anything else. It's similar with Hercules, you guys have to admit. Is there anything that will stop my immortality? No. Can I deal damage? Yes. Pew pew pew. That's what Hercules does. And obviously that's why he is the strongest Cosmo champion at the moment in the game, without a doubt. One of the most desirable champions in the game. Period. he approaches the levels of good that's over 9,000 and definitely stupid. But that is it. Right. Now that I have kept you guys entertained for 55 minutes, as it seems, I will push this list. And look at that. This time I actually got both of the names right. So we have old Cosmic Top 10, new Cosmic Top 10. Not too much of a change. Couple of placements changed. So, you know, CGR over to Hyperion. Then Corvus, Null, King, Groot, Venom, Venompool remained exactly the same. Angela gained a little bit. Hulkling and Cersei are two newcomers towards the bottom. They pushed out CMM and they pushed out Odin. Speaking of CMM, I completely forgot to mention her. Speaking of CMM, I actually had quite a long discussion today about CMM. And I do think that she has slid into borderline irrelevance. I know that's very, very harsh thing to say, but I do think it's Kabam's fault. Because CMM practically demands you bring in Nick Fury in order for her to work. At the same time, Kabam has started creating path identities that demand very, very specific things. Either for your champion to be cosmic, or for your champion to be poison immune, or for your champion to have, you know, super easy access to fury buffs, or for your champion to be able to arm break or one thing or another. Fact is, whenever you would want to bring in CMM, in newest content, you almost never want to bring in Nick Fury. And whenever you would want to bring in Nick Fury, you almost never want to bring in CMM. And that is exactly the reason, among the fact that CMM does have a fairly demanding playstyle where you need to be able to spam your heavy attacks and all that other stuff, why I think CMM has fell down pretty much in obscurity. There was a time when, you know, I absolutely loved the champion. I ranked her up immediately, gave her a Genetic Awakening gem as a 5-star. Now the 6-star, I really don't even want to take her up to rank 3, even though I do have her at like 640 and Awakened. So I do genuinely believe she has fallen out of top 10. Might be harsh, but hey, here we are. Either way, that is it for this one. Tomorrow we have the mutant one, and fuck me, that's gonna be hard. Ooh. Fine. That's it for now. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you guys later. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next